When we knew who we were going against, we was like, that's not a factor at all. Not a factor at all. It's just we have another team on the schedule that we got to take care of, and that's all it was.
A game Owls fans circled on their calendars does not disappoint.
And neither will we, as the conference opener looms large. Inside the Nest is live, and it starts right now. Hello and welcome back to yet another live edition of Inside the Nest. Alongside Dan Wilson, I'm Brooklyn Vaughn.
A lot to get to today, including a full recap of the Georgia Tech win. We'll hear from Geoff Collins on his return, and we'll preview the AAC opener, a trip down to East Carolina on Thursday. But first, that Georgia Tech game, the final noon conference game of 2019, and Temple, it was a good one for so many reasons. Starting with this guy, Geoff Collins, returned to Lincoln Financial Field. This time as the head coach of the Yellow Jackets. First drive of the game, Owls on 3rd and goal as Anthony Russo rolls to his right, only to throw his 6th interception of the season into the hands of Georgia Tech defensive back Caleb Oliver. Second quarter, Yellow Jackets return the favor. 3rd and goal, quarterback Tobias Oliver is flushed out of the pocket, dives for the goal line, but Isaiah Graham Mobley is having none of it. Pops the ball into the hands of Christian Braswell. Still no score. Later in the quarter, 4th and 1 at the Georgia Tech 18. Carey elects to keep the offense on the field, and Ray Davis picks up the first and a whole lot more. 18-yard touchdown gives the Owls a 7-0 lead. Final seconds of the half, give goes to Davis again from a yard out, and he walks in nearly untouched. Give the freshman running back 135 yards and 2 touchdowns on the day. To the second half we go, still 14-0. Oliver looks to run and puts the ball on the ground again. Talk about a perfect bounce. Benny Walls, the AAC Defensive Player of the Week, is gone. 74-yard touchdown recovery, the first touchdown in the collegiate career for the senior safety. Later in the third, Owls trying to get some breathing room. But for the 3rd time this year, in just 4 games by the way, Temple is guilty of a safety. 4th quarter, Yellow Jackets now using James Graham at quarterback, and Benny Walls makes his 2nd highlight reel play of the game. Interception in the end zone, taken out for a return of 63 yards. Owls win this one 24-2 and take down their 2nd Power 5 team of the season, this time against their former head coach.
When your defense goes and pitches a shutout, you don't need to say any more than that. They pitched a shutout. And then offensively, we did exactly what we wanted to do. We wanted to come out and run the ball.
It was definitely, when I saw my phone and my dad texted me and said, you got 100, it was definitely, it was exciting, but my goal is to continue to have more and more success with getting 100-yard games and our line to do what they do.
Focus. It's one game don't define who we are. Everybody gets run on, everybody does bad things. We just got to keep rebounding, keep going, keep pushing. So that ain't nothing.
I think as a football player, you got to block out the outside noise. But we spent 2 years of our life with those guys, grinding, going through hard stuff. That was our family for 2 years. So, it's a little different playing against them, but we had nothing but all the respect in the world for them. We love those guys, but at the end of the day, it's football player. You got to block out the outside noise, and it's all about us. And we just had to go out there and execute our game plan.
I thought we played really, really hard against one of the best front sevens in all of college football, and that offensive line is really, really good as well. So credit to them, credit to the Temple University players. Obviously, tried to hide my emotions as much as I could throughout the last 2 weeks. But seeing the guys that we were blessed to coach the last 2 years and compete against them, I thought our guys went out there and battled and fought.
And Collins' return to the link did not go as planned for his Yellow Jackets. Just 2 points, 0 coming from the offensive unit. Quarterback James Graham had a day to forget, completing only 10 of 24 pass attempts for 100 yards and an interception. His 17.9 QBR on Saturday was his worst of the season. Dual threat quarterback Tobias Oliver was Georgia Tech's best rusher, totaling 68 yards on 11 carries, but Oliver fumbled twice, and one of his fumbles was recovered by Temple safety Benny Walls and ran back for an Owls touchdown. Georgia Tech receivers Amarine Brown and Jalen Camp combined for over 120 yards on 7 receptions, but their efforts weren't enough for Georgia Tech to sustain a passing attack against the Temple defense. While Russo wasn't much better himself, at least on the stat sheet. He also completed less than 50% of his attempts and threw his AAC leading 6th interception of the season. This comes 1 week after throwing 3 picks in the loss to Buffalo. Saturday was Ray Davis's breakout performance. The freshman running back ran for 135 yards on 29 attempts and scored both of Temple's offensive touchdowns in the second quarter. Sophomore standout Jaden Blue once again led the Owls receiving corps as he snagged 4 of Anthony Russo's 9 completions.
Definitely not the return Geoff Collins was looking for. He may be a defensive-minded head coach, but the Yellow Jackets offense didn't score a single point in this game. Not to mention, they also turned the ball over 3 times while going 2 for 14 on 3rd down. To the Temple side, Davis was a monster, rushing for 135 yards and 2 touchdowns. The Owls' game plan was well executed. Georgia Tech's secondary is the strong suit, and the Owls took advantage with Davis at their disposal, pounding the rock. The freshman running back had the best game of his young 4-game career to date, and through 4 games, he's made a name for himself as a problem for opposing AAC coaches. To the defensive side, Benny Walls had quite the day to remember as well. A 63-yard interception to go along with a 74-yard touchdown on a fumble recovery and 6 tackles. And that's good enough for the AAC Defensive Player of the Week. In other news, number 9 was awarded after Monday's practice to redshirt junior defensive end Quincy Roche.
Quincy Roche, obviously one of the many Owls helping the team win in spite of inconsistent offensive performance.
With more on the struggles of quarterback Anthony.
Everybody know how important it is.
One of the many Owls, Quincy Roche is one of the many Owls helping the team win in spite of inconsistent offensive performances.
With more on the struggles of quarterback Anthony Russo, we go to Inside the Nest reporter Dom Gillespie, who is live at Edberg Olson. Hey, Dom.
Thanks, guys. The expectation for this season for the Owls was to be a pass-heavy offense. But through the first 4 games of the season, it's been the run game carrying most of the load due to some early struggles behind center.
Buffalo Bulls 2 games ago with 3 interceptions, Anthony Russo was ready for a bounce-back game.
Joey Banks, and he's going to try.
But that bounce-back game wasn't much better, with another interception and 0 passing touchdowns in the win over Georgia Tech.
You know, it wasn't the prettiest game for me. A lot for me to watch the film tomorrow and correct going into ECU next week is going to be a tough test for us. But
in the Owls' 2 biggest wins this season, their defense has carried much of the load. It's the main reason why the Owls are 3-1 instead of 1-3.
We are ecstatic with the outcome of the game. When your defense goes and pitches a shutout, you don't need to say any more than that. They pitched a shutout. And then offensively, we did exactly what we wanted to do. We wanted to come out and run the ball.
Now, as far as Russo goes, not the most memorable performance on the stat sheet, completing less than 50% of his passes and only throwing for 127 yards. Head coach Rod Carey isn't too worried about these numbers, though, because he says it's all part of the plan.
I don't know that is fair to say that he struggled, to be honest with you. I think it's really fair to say that he executed at an amazingly high level for what we asked him to do today.
While the coaches seem to be happy, it's hard to ignore the red flags that keep popping up in the form of interceptions. At least one every game this season. Not the place you want to be heading into conference play this coming Thursday night.
So if you're a glasses half full kind of guy like me, it's good that the Owls are 3-1 without Russo playing up to his full capability. But they are going to need more consistency behind center going deeper into conference play this coming Thursday. Reporting from Edberg Olson Hall, I'm Dom Gillespie. Back to you guys in the studio.
Thank you, Dom. Saturday's game was filled with storylines, and we've picked out what we feel are the most notable.
Yeah, both the offense and the defense had highs and lows, but I'll start off with the star of the Owls offense on Saturday. No surprise here, Ray Davis continues to put on a show. As a freshman, he accounted for 135 out of the 198 total rushing yards that the Owls put up on Saturday. He's the first freshman with 100 rushing yards and 2 touchdowns in a game since Matt Brown did it against Kent State back in 2009.
You heard reporter Dom Gillespie touch on it. Anthony Russo struggled yet again on Saturday as his offense scored 24 points and 24 points in a 22-point win. But don't be fooled. He threw for 127 yards, while Ray Davis ran for 135 and 2 touchdowns by himself. Not necessarily a lack of trust in the redshirt junior quarterback. Georgia Tech's weakness does lie in their run defense. Russo threw his 6th pick of the year on the first drive of the game. His game is still far from complete, and it's absolutely going to need to take a step forward into conference play.
Well, not many negatives on the day, but this one, coming in the 4th quarter, will impact the Owls moving forward. Dan Archibong is ejected for targeting quarterback James Graham. This means that Archibong will be ineligible for the first half of play against ECU. Not good news for the Owls. This is the 3rd time in Temple's 4 games that the Owls have had a defensive player disqualified for targeting. Something Temple's defense will definitely have to clean up heading into conference play.
Georgia Tech's offense didn't do them many favors on Saturday. The Yellow Jackets were 2 for 14 when trying to move the sticks, which actually speaks larger to the strength that is the Owls' defense. The Owls are 6th in the country in 3rd down defense. Their opponents have converted just 17 out of 68 times. Of course, the Owls aren't bad on 4th down when it comes to it either, delivering 2 massive stops to close out the win over Maryland. And we have to go to our first break, but don't go anywhere.
When we come back, we'll drop into Rod Carey's weekly media press conference, looking back at Georgia Tech and looking ahead to ECU. We'll be back in a minute 30. Welcome back to Inside the Nest. We're looking live at Edberg Olson Hall, where Rod Carey will soon be addressing the media in just a few moments.
Rod Carey has often mentioned the 24-hour rule that he's instilled for his players and staff about how you can't think about the previous week's game, regardless of the result, for more than a day. And on 4 days rest, you have to imagine the whole process of your weekly preparation definitely speeds up. The Owls don't have until Saturday. They play on Thursday Night Football on the road in an AAC opener, and you have to imagine that's going to come up in this press conference. They will be going down to ECU, who is not projected to be one of the top teams in the conference, but still the first conference game in Rod Carey's tenure as the head coach of the Owls and in his tenure as a coach in the AAC.
Of course, Dan, and they can't take this one lightly. Rod Carey had talked about this going out of the Buffalo game. He said he wasn't prepared enough for this game, this matchup, and he can't be doing the same thing moving into their first conference matchup. This is when it matters most, but we are going to go ahead. It looks like Rod Carey is live at the podium now at Edberg Olson Hall. Let's hear what he has to say.
So it's crazy. We're 48 hours, well, a little over 48 hours before the game. We're well into that. But going back to the Georgia Tech game after reviewing the film, really happy with the way we executed the game plan and the emotion and passion that the guys played with. I think that showed out and something that I was happy to see, obviously coming off the previous week. So going into this week, we're obviously going into a tough environment. You know, they have a great fan base and they're really well coached. They're a good football team. They have good skill. The quarterback can run around. You know, up front, they're tough and rugged. Their linebackers are downhill. Wide receivers are good and skilled, and they play about 3 or 4 backs in there. So they keep them fresh as well. And then, you know, their safeties are very good. And you can tell that they're putting in their system and they're executing their system at a high level. It's similar to what they had done at James Madison. And, you know, just a well-coached football team that's going to be a heck of a challenge for us come Thursday evening. So we're looking forward to it. So with that, I'll open it up for questions.
You've been through this before, preparing on a short week.
Yeah, unfortunately.
What is the key to it?
Yeah, I don't know that there's any one key. I think that there's a balance of game plan implementation and getting them physically ready to play. We had to have 2 practices, but we didn't hit because obviously we're just 72 hours from when we played a game. and we're 48 or a little more than that going in. So there's a balance there, and I think every team's a little bit different on how you have to balance that. So we extended the practices a little bit, felt like we needed that, but didn't physically beat them up too much.
Rod, second time going on the road, we know what happened the first time. Is there anything you learned from that first?
Yeah, I don't like the way that I did the schedule, to be quite honest with you, and I've changed some scheduling stuff as far as us going on the road. And so just in a manner to keep our mental preparation on flow and mirror more of what we do at home. And so that's the biggest thing that I learned. And then the team, learning them about how they react on the road and what they need too. So I think those two things are going to marry up a lot better this time.
One other thing that's common, you're coming off big wins both and now. Is there anything about that maybe?
Yeah, we didn't handle the success very well the first time, right? I mean, obviously. I think history is the best teacher of them all, so we have that to fall back on, and we've talked about that a little bit. And also the fact it's only a 5-day turnaround, so you don't have any time to worry about last game. I mean, we got about 12 hours to celebrate that thing and then move forward.
The past two target injections seem to kind of hurt you guys a little bit with Ty not being able to play for that first half and Sean leaving. How are you going to be able to handle that in that first half? I know you guys have comfortable depth on the defensive line, but without Dan, how do you guys handle that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think you're going to see Kevin Robertson in there a little bit, along with more Ramo, obviously, and Chris Banks, and so along with Ifan. So still have a 4-man rotation in there, but Dan's a starter for a reason, right? Because he's earned the right to do that. So that'll be something that we'll have to weather the storm. But I have good faith in those guys too that I just mentioned, especially with Ramo being a senior. And quite frankly, I think Ramo played his best game so far this season last week. So I feel good about that going into this game.
Rod, I was wondering if I could get a comment on Quincy earning single digits.
Yeah, really excited for Quincy, the team. We had one more single digit to vote for, and there was really some talk amongst the single digits and myself about when we had that, when we were going to do that, and they kind of decided, that after non-conference, we'll do the vote, and if somebody has earned it, then we'll do it, because I don't think anybody felt like they'd earned that last number 9 before the season started. So I thought it was a great idea by them, so we went ahead and voted on Sunday, and got the vote back, and then got to the single digits, and a couple of them gone home, go to bed. So Sean didn't know it before Monday morning, but it was clear cut, and so really happy for Quincy. He's earned it, and I know the single digits were happy. I know the team was happy, and that's a big deal. Number 9's a big deal around here, and so he knows the burden that his team just placed on him, and I think he's really excited to meet the challenge.
Were there any other players considered for number 9?
Sure. I mean, all the D-line was up for the vote of it, and that's how the vote came out. I'm not going to share the results because I don't want to. That's internal, but all the other D-line was up for, because it's really a D-line number. That's what it's been here, and so we wanted to honor that tradition in the single digits. We're pretty adamant about that.
Hey, Rod, you had talked since spring about your linebacker core, and Isaiah Graham-Mobley is not a starter, but he kind of plays like
he is.
Could you kind of talk about what you've seen out of him?
Well, I mean, he's playing all 3 positions right now and mentally handling it well. Like, he graded out good at field, boundary, and middle, all 3 of them. He played all 3 of them in the game. He's a starter. And really, you'd like to start all 4 of them. It just happens to be that we had some other guys in positions that would mean making some position or scheme moves, and we're pretty comfortable with that right now. So he is a starter to me, and to him and to the other linebackers.
On Saturdays, I mean, Ray was really running the ball effectively, and you guys seemed to be in rhythm. Was there any thought with the game kind of out of hand and you guys playing on Thursday to kind trying to get Kyle Dobbins in there to get some touches? I know you wanted to get.
Kyle was ready to go at the end. Jagger got a little banged up, and he's fine for the game. But at the end of the game, Kyle was ready to go, and then we got those first downs, and then they weren't using the timeout. So the plan was to get him in right there. They weren't using their timeout, so we were afforded the ability to take a knee. Game situations sometimes dictate that, and I feel bad for that, but I liked the way he was ready to go, and he was mentally locked in.
The way the schedule broke down, the non-conference and the conference, in Northern, you had a lot of success in the conference. Even last year, I think you were 7-5 and still won the division. Was there something you can look at as a key for why you had that kind of success in the league?
Well, I think through the course of the time in Northern, we had success in the conference because I always say it's like fighting your brother. You grow up fighting them, and you're in there the whole time. You know you're going to play every year. You have a lot of familiarity. Like this game right here, yeah, the two staffs are new, but these players have played each other consistently. So there's familiarity, and I think with familiarity, you have a lot more information about this guy likes to do this. Really the nitty-gritty, the boring little details of football that aren't very sexy for really anybody unless you're a football coach. You really get that information, and the players can share it back and forth, and they know what you're talking about.
Speaking of the new staff, what have you seen as the biggest difference from ECU last year? And obviously,
yeah, I didn't really. I mean, I've watched ECU last year as it pertained to when Temple played them for really scouting Temple when we first got here and all that stuff. So I can't speak to the difference because I know that they made a coaching change and they weren't very good, but that's the extent of what I know. I see a really well-coached football team here. That fits things the right way on defense, does things the right way on offense, is very diverse on offense, and in the kicking game is very, very sound. So I can't speak to the difference.
Geoff, just talk about the job Geoff, your defensive coordinator, has done. I mean, obviously, 2 weeks ago, Buffalo, the defense got put in some bad spots, but for the most part, they played really, really well.
Yeah, I think our defense overall, over the course of the year, guys, has played at a high, high standard. I think when you look at the 38 points at Buffalo, situational football really dictates a lot of that. And certainly pleased with all the defensive coaches. And Geoff is certainly the lead dog there, but Fran Brown, Tyler Yelk, Melvin Rice, and Walter Stewart, fantastic coaches. And quite frankly, I'm happy with the entire staff on what we're doing and how we're coaching, along with Mike Uranovich, the OC, and the other assistant coaches there. I'm just really pleased with the way that we're interacting with the kids, building the relationships, and teaching. These guys are all teachers, and that's number one thing that I look for.
The midweek game when everybody else plays on Saturday, what does that exposure, do you think, do for the program?
Oh, exposure-wise? Yeah. Well, I mean, aren't we on the flagship? Aren't we on ESPN? I mean, I heard that, so, I mean, how can it get any better than that, right? I think that we've played a lot of games in the past on ESPNU and ESPN3 and ESPN2, but this is first time, I think, we might have played on ESPN before, but it's great for Temple, and it's great for our university. It's great for our players. It's great for our program, but really, overall, it's just great for Philadelphia and the city as a whole. You get us out there.
I talked to Anthony after the game Saturday. He said I do try, I think sometimes rely on my arm talent too much and trying to muscle a throw in there. Is it just as simple as just trying to settle him down, saying, is there any other trick to get them to kind of just avoid making that throw when a quarterback wants to make a play?
Yeah, no, there's no trick, right? It's flow, it's confidence, it's all those things we've seen from him. And certainly, I was pleased, and I know the numbers don't reflect that from last game, but I was pleased with how he played. We asked him to go ahead and execute a game plan where he knew it might be 5 runs in a row, and then we got to pick up a third down, and a tough third down. And he did that. We were 7 of 15 on third down, which is a big deal for us coming off the previous 2 weeks. So I thought he played really well there, minus the first throw, the first pick right there in the end zone, which is probably what he's referencing. He's just got to realize game situation. He's got 3 points on the board. just throw that one out, kick the field goal, go up 3-0, and let's go out and do it again.
Talking to Christian earlier, he kind of alluded to, that ECU likes to run a lot of RPOs. I mean, you guys face Maryland. Obviously, they're two different offenses.
Braswell, you're talking about? Yeah.
Granted, you guys had success against that. Does it give you confidence going into the game?
Yeah, it is two different offenses. I don't know that any coach going into any game is full of confidence. I think we're full of worry more than we're full of confidence. But I like the way they're executing right now, the way they're paying attention and worried about what's in front of them right now. And that's key. You got to keep your eyes right when you're facing offenses like this. And certainly we've done that so far. Now we got to go do it again.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
All right, and there you have it. Rod Carey addressing the media today, looking ahead to their next opponent, the ECU Pirates. We now go ahead and bring in our beat reporter, Ray Dunn, to break this one down with us. Hey, Ray.
Hey, guys. Pleasure to be here.
Yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about, obviously, first conference game going into this one. It's a big matchup. It's a short week. There's a lot of things working against the Owls' favor. They may be the better team on paper, but it's also really important to take into consideration a couple adversities that they're going to go ahead and have moving into Greenville this week.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you hit on it with the short week. There's definitely a lack of physicality in practice as they get ready for this type of matchup. And additionally, the road schedule, they're trying to change it up. You heard Coach Carey talking about in his press conference. They're trying to change up the road schedule, kind of adjust to what went wrong against Buffalo so they don't have another letdown like that, and dealing with emotional wins. They came off an emotional win against Maryland, and they really had a letdown against Buffalo. Now they've beaten an ACC team for the first time since 2011. How do they deal with that, deal with the emotions of winning that game, beating their former coach, and moving on now to ECU?
Ray, I wanted to hit on the running back committee, which you kind of alluded to a little bit there. Jagger Gardner apparently left the game with an injury against Georgia Tech. Does this mean more Kyle Dobbins? Does this mean just the Ray Davis show? What do you kind of see here?
Well, you can kind of see right now Ray Davis taking this committee kind of by storm. He's going to be the lead guy. They love the fact that they're going to have a committee. Jagger Gardner is a very talented back, but with him being a little banged up, this is back-to-back weeks where Coach Carey has mentioned that they are trying to get Kyle Dobbins involved. I think you're going to see a lot more of him just because they want to see what they have there. And against a team like ECU, where it isn't exactly your top-of-the-line competition conference-wise, to get Kyle Dobbins really into the game, get him in the flow of the game, see what he can do to really expand that running back by committee. And,
of course, not only short on the injury front, Dan Archibong, ejected with targeting. He's going to be out in the first half of this game. A little bit of a setback for the Owls on defense. What do you see them doing there?
I could see them going to Karamo Diabuti as well as Chris Banks, two guys that they really cycle in there no matter what the situation in the game. I would imagine that's what they're going to try and do. They have such depth in that front seven and really along that defensive line where I don't see it really being that big of a problem. But without Dan Archibong, it's definitely going to be a concern for the Owls.
Mm-hmm. Now, this game will be the debut of number 9 single-digit Quincy Roche. You heard kind of the process he took there, kind of the elite club, all the other single digits voting on it. Were you surprised by that at all? And you like the choice?
I like the choice. I absolutely like the choice. I think Quincy Roche changes games with the way he plays. That defensive line, they mentioned that number 9 is a single digit meant for the defensive line. So the fact that he gets it, it's really shown in the past 2 years his growth, the way he's kind of taken on a leadership role within this program. So he absolutely deserves it. And the way they vote on it, really interesting that they get those guys who are single digits to bring on the next group. It's kind of that passing of the guard. Like, we are the single digits, and we want everyone to be recognized that we feel deserves to be alongside us.
And Ray, again, addressing the short week. They're at another disadvantage there. Not as much time to prepare for this one. They can't take it lightly. They need as much time as they can get going into the Buffalo game. Rod had mentioned that he wasn't feeling well prepared. He's extending practices. What do you think about that one?
I think it's certainly interesting. I think the idea of extending practice is fine as long as you aren't using it all on those days where you're getting physical to hit. Like, they're not going to have much physicality this week, which is okay in the short week. Game planning wise, it's smart because you're able to get that full implementation of the game plan. You're able to run your scout team out there. But in general, I would be very cautious not to overwork them going in the fact that you have to go on the road very soon.
All right, and thank you so much, Ray, for
Thank you, Ray.
joining us. Well, with a big win in the rearview mirror, the team now has its eyes set on their next opponent, the East Carolina Pirates, who Temple will face Thursday in Greenville, North Carolina. We caught up with the players at practice on Thursday to hear how they're getting ready.
Yeah, I think that, the more the season goes on, the more that this team's starting to realize what Coach Carey calls the 24-hour rule. Win or loss, got 24 hours to either learn from it or enjoy it, and then it's on to the next. And I think the more we play, the more games that we go through, the more this team kind of has that mindset that, as soon as it hits Sunday, we got to turn the page and go on to the next one, especially a short week like this. We knew that we were going to have to turn the page quickly. We enjoyed that win for that night, but as soon as Sunday hit, we had to turn the page and start working on ECU. So I think that, that next step mentality that we've had just keeps getting better and better for us each week.
They look control what you can control. Don't worry about the outside noise and just come in every day to work, regardless of who your opponent is. Because last week we got too hard on ourselves after a big win at Maryland. Well, when Maryland was here, but after that big win, we got hard on ourselves. So we just want to make sure we stay humble and just continue to keep working, regardless of our opponent, and worry about us. But mentally, we're doing all that extra mentally. We're coming in extra to watch film with our coaches and watch the film by ourselves. And also, just any bit of mental prep that we can do to add an advantage to the game, that's what we're trying to do.
ECU with this year, they got different quarterback. They got some more weapons. They like to take some shots. They run the ball pretty well. They do it all around. They're a good team. We just got to make sure we do what we're supposed to do.
Again, working on what we can do to be better and where we can be to line up better and how we can make plays. So, definitely.
When it's a short week like this, it's all about your mentality. It's a mental game, man. You have to watch film, you have to prepare and get ready because you're not going to get all the reps you might want to get and might need during the week when it's a longer week, of course. Since it's a shorter week, all your reps going to come from watching film, So the more you watch film, the more detail you are about that. It's going to dictate how good you can play this game.
It's going to be loud down there. They cancel classes. It's a blackout. It's going to be a great atmosphere, but, we're going to have to go down there and just worry about us, control what we can control, and execute our scheme well, and I think we'll be fine.
And Anthony Russo said it himself. They're going to turn the page. They can't get high on themselves like they did after Maryland. Well, we have to take a quick timeout, but don't go anywhere. Don't touch that remote. It's time to break down those Pirates when we get back.
And we'll address some of the reasons why it's just so hard to win on the road. Inside the Nest, we'll be back in 90 seconds.
A solid football team. When you look at their roster, they're older, they're big, they're very experienced. Physical football team, a lot of skill and athleticism at the stand-up positions. It's a program that has consistently won at the highest level of anyone in our league over the history of the American Conference, and one that's been very, very good the past several years. So, big challenge we got this Thursday night, but we're excited about it.
Welcome back. Now, I am no math major, but it doesn't take much to see just how hard it is to win on the road in college football. Take the Temple Owls, for example. 4 games so far this year, 3 at home, undefeated. Yes, just that one road game, but it was by far Temple's worst. Plays per game is similar, but beyond that, the numbers don't lie. In particular, the points per game is considerably less. The Owls scored just 22 points at Buffalo, and you might remember that number would be a lot lower if it weren't for a late garbage time touchdown.
But let's go even deeper. Maybe it's not home versus away. If you take away the Bucknell game, Temple's offense is only averaging 18.5 points per game at home.
Yeah, and now let's turn to the defense. Once again, only a 1-game sample size, 73 plays per game, 279 yards allowed per game, 3.8 yards per play, and 31 points allowed against Buffalo. It should be noted, too, that the Bulls started 3 drives inside the 23-yard line. The offense and the special teams definitely didn't help the Owls out much in this one.
The defense has been lights out at home, allowing an average of 4.3 points per game. That's a much different story than their performance up in Buffalo. Also, something to keep in mind, though, Buffalo started 3 drives from inside the Temple 25 due to turnover and special teams blunders. ECU is under the direction of first-year head coach, who was most recently the coach at James Madison University. Houston Hansover coached in conference as prominent as the AAC, but his 83-27 record is still impressive. He has the Pirates out to a 3-2 start to the season. However, 2 of those wins have come at the expense of FCS teams. In the 3 games against FBS opponents, the Pirates are 1-2 and have been outscored 97-40 in those games. Also important to note, the Owls are 5-0 against ECU since they've started playing one another as part of the AAC schedule.
And leading the Pirates to their 3-2 record are these guys right here. Sophomore quarterback Holton Ahlers leads the team in rushing touchdowns with 3 so far, and this is the 3rd most out of all AAC quarterbacks. He's another mobile quarterback for the Owls to face, but he isn't a throwing threat. He's thrown more interceptions than passing touchdowns, 5 interceptions through 5 games. The only person ahead of him, you ask? Well, it's Anthony Russo with 6 interceptions. Blake Prohl, sophomore wide receiver, is Holton Ahlers' go-to target. We'll have more on him in just a moment. And senior defensive end Kendall Futrell will be the next test for this stout Temple O-line. He's currently tied for 2nd most sacks in the AAC and 2nd most tackles on the team and in the AAC as well.
Well, we just touched briefly on 2 of them, but let's take a closer look at our players to watch.
Well, I'll start off with one of the Pirates' most dangerous threats on offense. You just saw him on your screen. Sophomore wideout Blake Prohl uses his speed to beat the Old Dominion corner deep here. He leads the team in receiving yards, and he's tied for receiving touchdowns with 2 so far this year. In his last game, he had just 2 receptions, but ended the day with 100 receiving yards and a touchdown. So far, he has the 9th most receiving yards in the AAC.
I'm going with defensive lineman Kendall Futrell. This guy is a stud. He's got the 2nd most tackles, not just on his own team, but in the entire AAC. Not only that, but his tackles have resulted in the 3rd most yards lost of any player in the conference. The real test for this Owls offensive line is going to be keeping Futrell out of the pocket when Russo drops back to pass, as he's tied for the most sacks in the conference through 5 weeks of play. Don't be surprised if you see some double teams to swallow him up. And now that we've given you the names to watch, here's what the Owls are going to need to do to win.
Yeah, Dan, if Temple wants to improve to 4-1, they're going to need to execute these few things. Here's my first key of the game, that O-line. They better be on their A game this week. If you take a look at ECU against ODU, Old Dominion, they had 11 tackles for loss with 4 sacks against the Old Dominion. They're now currently ranked 29th in sacks in the nation, too. Definitely something to keep an eye on.
My first key, the pass rush needs to be on point in this one, forcing quarterback Holton Ahlers to make decisions. His touchdown to interception ratio is 4-5. He's a mobile quarterback. When he's forced to make decisions and kept inside of the pocket, he flusters. ECU definitely prominent to turning the ball over. If Temple can get pressure on the quarterback, as they have done in previous games this season, it's going to bode very well for the Owls in this one.
Now, speaking of the defense, it'd be ideal if they can go ahead and get an opening 3 and out to shut them down early. Take a look at Temple's opening drive defense. They're limiting teams to 17 plays, 24 yards, 2 interceptions with not a single point allowed. Remember, the Pirates have never beaten Temple since joining the AAC, so it's pretty important that they get them down early in this one.
Yeah, my second key is going to be get ECU off the field on 3rd down. And I got 2 stats that lead me to believe that they can. First is ECU is 34% on 3rd down this season, which ranks 108 out of 130 FBS teams. The second, it's a strength for the Owls. They're 6th in the country on defense of getting their opponents off the field on 3rd down. 17 of 68. That's how many times teams have converted 3rd downs against the Owls this season.
Yeah, well, we couldn't get enough of him the first time, so now we are joined again by Ray Dunn, who's going to break this Temple team down by the numbers.
Hey, Ray.
Thanks, guys. With a month of the season already gone by, some trends on this Temple team have become glaring. From the 3rd down to the way teams are scoring against the Owls, let's take a dive into the numbers. The numbers have been gaudy defensively for the Owls, but consider these alarming trends for the offense. The defense looks even more impressive. The offense and special teams have given up 18 points. That includes 3 safeties and 2 pick sixes. That means this defense is really allowing just under 13 points per game. That gets even more impressive when you consider the number of times, 7 to be exact, that teams have started in Temple's territory because of the Owls' offense or special teams. In order for the offense to step up to the defense's level, a lot will fall on quarterback Anthony Russo's shoulders. The redshirt junior had a great start to the season, but his last 2 games have seen his completion percentage drop by nearly 20 percentage points compared to his first 2 games. Additionally, he's throwing for just over 5 yards per attempt and has had more interceptions than touchdowns in those games. Simply put, that will not get it done. Lucky for Russo, however, is a favorable matchup against East Carolina this week, who he torched for over 10 yards per attempt and 4 touchdowns a year ago. The reason the Owls sit at 3-1 is because of just how dominant this defense has been. They've been able to slow teams down through the air, ranking 10th in the country at 151.3 yards per game. Conveniently, East Carolina has been terrible through the air so far. On top of that, Temple's defense has been locked in on what former head coach Geoff Collins called the money down, allowing teams to convert on third down just 25% of the time. Similarly, ECU is converting 25% of the time on third down against FBS opponents. The Owls enter the game on Thursday with a clear advantage. East Carolina has been outscored by 19 points per game against teams in FBS Division I college football and ranked 94th in total offense per game. This is one Temple should win. Reporting from the Plasma, I'm Ray Dunn. Brooklyn and Dan, back to you.
Thanks, Ray. We have to take another timeout, but don't go anywhere. When we come back, Brooklyn and I will square off another edition of No Huddle.
That's right. We'll discuss how confident Owls fans should be heading into conference play, a new law that'll allow college athletes to be paid, and we, of course, will give you our predictions for Thursday night's game in Greenville. We'll be back in 90 seconds. Welcome back to Inside the Nest, and welcome back to our favorite segment, No Huddle.
6 topics, 6 questions. Here we go. First question. Brooklyn, would you rather ride with Ray Davis or continue a running back committee approach with Davis and Jagger Gardner?
Dan, good question, because obviously Ray Davis, that freshman running back, he's a stud right now. Jagger Gardner leaving last game a little bit banged up, so that raises the question, should we keep using both of them? I don't really know, but I think it would help reduce the risk of injury, and it would keep them obviously both fresh. So I'm going to say stick with that committee approach, using both dual threat weapons. I think it's a great plan.
I'm kind of happy with where they are right now as well. I think Ray Davis should be the eventual starter over Jagger Gardner. I understand that the way college football and even the NFL is moving is that running back by committee approach, but I think Ray Davis has definitely earned it here. He's got 60% of the carries, partially due to that injury you mentioned the other day, but his carries have gone up and up every week, had a monster game. He rushed for more yards than Anthony Russo even threw for in this game. I think by the end of the season, it's going to be a clear bell cow situation for him.
All right, Dan, next question. Should Temple fans be confident now in the Owls heading into conference play?
Yeah, you have no reason not to be. Look, on the AAC East side of things, there's no dominant team as there has been in prior years. There are no undefeated teams left, and we haven't even got into the Owls conference portion of the schedule. This isn't like prior years where UCF kind of dominates it. Temple is just as capable of getting to that AAC championship game as any of the other teams are. They're playing that AAC East. This conference as a whole is more wide open than it has been in years past, and the team has looked good with the exception of that trip up to Buffalo, which is going to be making sure that the team travels on the road.
Well, Dan, I agree. I can't agree more. I think that they're in a great spot going into conference play, obviously taking a look around the rest of the conference. Special teams is looking a little bit better. Obviously, that was my concern in the past couple of weeks. They look a little bit better. The offense is doing better. Defense is obviously clicking. So I think that now all 3 parts are kind of moving. All the gears are turning. They're set up in a great position moving forward.
Well, Brooklyn, I don't have to tell you that there's Temple coaches all over the country. Which former Temple head coach will last the longest? Is it going to be Matt Rule, Steve Addazio? Who you got?
Okay, I'm going to say Geoff Collins, and here's why. I know about that Baylor contract with Matt Rule right now, but Geoff Collins, remember, he went there because that's home to him. Obviously, they're off to a slow start, but this is a rebuilding process. You know, they're really focusing heavily on recruiting down there, and if his plan goes accordingly, I can see him staying there for the long haul, absolutely.
Yeah, Geoff Collins, not a bad pick. Manny Diaz, also not a bad pick. He was only the coach for 17 days, but I'm going to go with Matt Rule. I understand these contract extensions are just a formality, and they can easily be bought out, fired, whatever the case may be, but I don't get the sense that Matt Rule is going anywhere. Look, he went to Baylor knowing that there was a bit of scandalous activity going on down there. I can't imagine that he's the only guy with a clean record that they would want to get rid of him this fast. He just signed that contract extension. You have to think that at least in their plans, he's in the long-term plans, but hard to predict. I'll go with Matt Rule.
shirt. Now let's go ahead and turn that coveted number 9 single-digit jersey was awarded today to Quincy Roche. Dan, you think he deserves it?
Yeah, absolutely. This number 9 is reserved. You heard Carey mention it in his press conference. It's reserved for a defensive lineman, and the other 8 single-digit players were really kind of voting on who should get that 9th single digit. So it's an elite club. It's obviously something they take very seriously, even going back to previous Owls head coaches. He's a senior. He's a leader in the locker room. He does it on the field. He does it off the field. Clearly well respected by the other players on the team. He's one of the best defensive linemen, which has been a strength for the Owls this season. I think Quincy Roche was a good choice.
I agree, Dan. And, he's a seasoned player. He's only a redshirt junior, but he definitely brings that sense of leadership to the team. He's been around. He knows the drill. Obviously, guys are looking up to him, and I really think that he is a great fit for that leadership role.
Now, another question for you, a little bit of national news. California Governor Gavin Newsom decided to sign a bill that allows NCAA athletes to profit from endorsements and from their likeness. Do you like this?
Well, obviously, this is a big national discussion right now. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm a little indifferent on the issue. I think it's a little bit different than should college athletes get paid, that question that's always coming up. But I do think that these athletes are profiting off of their talents. The NCAA right now restricting them from doing a lot more things and having a platform of freedom. So I feel like this rule is a great idea to pass through. I'm really interested to see how all of these contracts and negotiations play out.
Brooklyn, I got a lot to say here. First of all, I think it's great that this happened in California. If this were to happen in a smaller state, maybe the Midwest, you might see the NCAA really abandon those schools. California is the biggest state in terms of population in the country. Huge. You have schools like USC, UCLA, Stanford, Cal, among others. The NCAA really can't afford to abandon those schools. So I think it's great that it happened in a state like that. And also, any other person or any other student even in the country could profit on their own likeness. Things like making a YouTube channel or signing endorsement deals. The NCAA is so overly restrictive, it's ridiculous. I understand that you don't want to pay players. You get into a whole mess and open up a new can of worms if you go into negotiating contracts. But allowing players to benefit from their likeness on the side, I think is absolutely a good thing and where the NCAA should be heading, even though they obviously don't like it.
Yeah, Dan, that's a great point. But our last point of the day, of course, everybody wants to know our predictions because we finally got it right last week. It only took us 3 weeks. Dan, what do you think is going to happen down in Greenville on Thursday night?
Temple should win this game. They should do it pretty handedly, too. They've never lost to ECU since they've joined the AAC. You heard Carey talk about that it's like any other week. I get it's a short week. Maybe they'll be a little sloppy to start. And it's also their first conference game, but ECU is not strong. There's some pretty clear-cut ways how they can handle this game, get on them early, and Temple shouldn't have too much struggles winning down in Greenville.
I agree, Dan. I'm expecting to see maybe a commanding win out of the Owls as they go down there. Obviously the better team on paper, but they do have a couple adversities working against them, heading down to a tough environment with a, quote, well-coached football team from Rod Carey. So obviously they're preparing, they're doing their due justice. We'll see how it goes for them. Well, Dan, unfortunately, it is time to settle down.
When we return, we take a look around the AAC. Don't go anywhere. Inside the Nest, we'll be right back. Welcome back to Inside the Nest. Time to take a look at our players of the week from around the AAC. Let's start with SMU quarterback Shane Buechele, who threw for 226 yards, 3 touchdowns, and an interception against USF on Saturday. He put the ball in the air 25 times and completed 21 of them. His quarterback rating in the game, 191.5. He also led nationally ranked SMU en route to a win. They took down the Bulls 48-21. Staying on the offensive side of the ball, it's harder to have a better receiving day than Gabriel Davis did for UCF. He only had 5 receptions, but he turned that into 119 yards and 3 touchdowns, including a 73-yard trip to the house. The junior wideout already has 499 receiving yards and 8 touchdowns this season. He's going to be a handful for every team he faces, including the Owls coming up on October 26th. Going back to SMU, senior safety Rodney Clemens hauled in 2 interceptions in the Mustangs' win over USF. He was a ball hawk on Saturday, and his coverage was good enough to the point that he only needed to make 3 tackles. Clemens recorded a third of his total career picks in one day, 2 on Saturday, giving him 6 career interceptions. The SMU defense held USF to a 21-point day on their home field. Still only a few conference games have taken place thus far, but that's about to pick up starting this weekend.
Absolutely. Let's go ahead now and take a look at the updated AAC standings. And you can see there out in the West, the SMU Mustangs and the Memphis Tigers are front runners, both undefeated thus far. Tulane, Green Wave, and Navy not too far behind though. Over in the East, UCF, number 18 UCF, they're going to take on Cincinnati, both of them with a loss so far. Cincinnati and Temple neck and neck there for second spot. It's going to be very interesting.
Yeah, as I mentioned early in the show, the AAC East more wide open than it ever has been before. That's going to be playing big for Temple, especially if they're trying to get to that AAC championship game. And while Temple gets its conference schedule underway, some important matchups with postseason implications will be going on this weekend as well.
Yeah, we got you covered with the games that you should be keeping an eye on. Let's go ahead and look here now. Of course, the biggest game of the weekend, number 18 UCF is at Cincinnati, 4-1 and 3-1, two of the top teams in the AAC East at the moment. And of course, the Owls are going to take on both of these teams in bigger matchups later in the year, so it's important to tune into this one. UCF is ranked 18th right now. As I said, they're going for their 17th straight conference win. Cincinnati's only loss was at the hands of Ohio State, number 4. And of course, Cincinnati losing 13 straight to the top 25 teams, so don't read too much into that. It's going to be one of the best AAC games of the year. Tune in Friday night, 8 p.m. on ESPN. Temple plays SMU later in the season, of course. Tulsa at SMU. Take a look at this game. SMU already playing for bowl eligibility. They're 5-0, and their offense is putting up 500 yards of offense per game. That game is Saturday, 6:30 on ESPNU. And of course, the Tulane Green Wave taking on Army. Both teams 3-1 right now. They're going for their third win in a row. Tulane has not always been a game to circle on the schedule, but Temple will play them on November 16th. Saturday at 11 a.m. Check out Tulane versus Army on CBS Sports Network.
It's a busy week, so don't stray too far from us. Be sure to tune in on Thursday at noon right here on TUTV when Sean McGeehan and Brian Steinmetz take the desk for OwlSports Update. They'll have more on Thursday night's matchup at ECU and coverage on this past week and Temple athletics. That'll do it for this edition of Inside the Nest.
Alongside Dan Wilson, I'm Brooklyn Vaughn. For entire crew, we'll see you next time.